When was the first time you picked up a pair of scissors? As a child, I remember sitting around a table with my siblings doing arts and crafts with only one pair of scissors between us. When I started school, there was that scissor rack in the middle of the arts and crafts table, but we all knew which pair was the sharpest. Now as quilters, we still have our favorites, but do we know why they're easy to use and how to keep them sharp? Today's guest, Ursula McClintock of LDH Scissors, has all the answers. And trust me, I asked her every question I could think of. So grab your sewing and a cup of tea, and here's my interview with Ursula McClintock. So are you a quilter or a crafter?
Well, I'm not a quilter yet. I have always been a crafter. My mom was very good about always having something for me and my sister to be doing. And I remember pipe cleaners very fondly as like the best of what you could be doing at your kitchen table. Like that's actually how I learned how to braid, was with pipe cleaners. And I don't know why that sticks out to me, but it's there. So she was always really good at making sure we were doing something with our hands. My first sewing lessons were in a studio in Toronto that we actually work with now today, which is kind of a funny full circle story. But doing what we're doing right now, me and my husband, Roy, there's just so much to pique my interest that it's hard to focus on one specific craft, if that makes sense.
So how did you come to be in the scissor business then?
So it's Roy's family business. His parents started the company in China, where he was born, about 30 years ago. And his mother has really brought up the company throughout those years, really brought up her family. And first of all, when we met, I did not know that his family was in the scissor making business, had this whole thing going on back home. And it was only a couple years later, after we were dating, he kind of sat me down. He was like, I need to tell you something. I was like, okay, this is very serious. He's like, my family makes scissors. And I kind of looked at him like, what are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. You mean like the scissors that you can get like anywhere? And no, it's very specific, the sewing scissors, and they've just been doing it forever. So in 2018, we were both working different jobs that we weren't happy with. And we kind of just sat down together one day and decided that we might as well give this a shot. We were still a little bit younger than we are now, so it was definitely the best time for us to sort of just jump right into it. And that's kind of how it started. So in Toronto, we live in Mississauga now. We've designed all the packaging. We design our products. We really do what we think is best for what we do here. And it's been really fun and really exciting.
I was surprised to know that scissors are not just stamped out. You need a craftsman to work with every single pair to give that sharpness to make them a good pair.
Yeah, it's a really interesting process. We've been to the factories a bunch of times, and the craftspeople that work there are just incredible. There was one woman in particular I remember, and I went there to film the process, and that's on our Instagram channel. And how fast and yet precise this woman was, and not just her, but everyone that was working there, from hammering the scissors to putting them together to making sure they're tight enough. It's such precise work and it's such specific craftsmanship. It's just mind-blowing.
What do they call that screw that holds them together? Is it just a screw, or
We call it a button. You mean
you
this
call it a
one
button?
here?
Yeah. I
It's
didn't
called a button.
realize how important that darn little thing is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's basically the heart of your entire scissor. It holds the blades together. I mean, you couldn't do that without the button itself, but it can be the place that's most susceptible to damage. And if your scissor is not feeling okay, then there could be some issues with your button there. And that's across any scissor at all, not just ours. So that's one thing to look out for.
So if I'm a beginner quilter, what do I need to know about scissors?
So scissors for quilters. So I assume on top of a rotary cutter, because I know quilters love their rotary cutters, I always recommend something a little bit smaller, like the 9-inch that you have, or even the 8-inch. They're going to be sort of your best options, because with quilts, you're cutting smaller pieces, especially if you've already cut all of your squares out, all of your delicate pieces. So if you need to be doing small little detailed cuts, maybe something hasn't been clipped properly, reaching for something like an 8-inch would be your best bet. Or even something, if you're doing a lot of very small applique, something small like the little imperials are really good. Anything that you can have a lot of control with for that top of the blade is going to be your best bet.
So the tip is the most important.
Yes. For any scissor, the tip, if it's not going to be cutting properly, it's not going to be a great experience. So a lot of the time with the scissor, of course, getting sharpness through here is going to be pretty much perfectly fine. You can pick up any scissor and it's likely going to cut anywhere along this part of the blade. But being able to cut right up to that tippy top of a scissor is going to be so key, because if anyone that sews can experience just maybe that little piece right into a corner that you haven't clipped properly, and you just got to get right in there. And that's when you need the tip, really.
So if I have more experience, what should I be looking at in a pair? Like if I'm wanting to have my forever ever pair, what should I be looking at?
Well, there's definitely a couple factors. Even a forever pair can be something as small as an 8-inch. And the reason I say that is because when you're looking for a scissor, one of the key factors that you have to keep in mind is actually a couple key factors. One would be the weight of the scissor. So a larger scissor, such as this 12-inch, is going to be a lot heavier than something like this 8-inch. So even if you are very experienced, something as big as this 12-inch might be too heavy for your wrist. Your hand might not actually fit in it very well. This is my entire hand going into the handle here. And the amount that you can open the scissor on the 12-inch, now it's going to be different when you're on a table because it's a different angle, is maybe about that much where I'm feeling comfortable with cutting. But if I take even a 9-inch, for example, I can comfortably open it almost all the way to the end, and you're getting almost the same amount of cut per scissor. So it's not always necessarily that bigger is better. Another thing to keep in mind when you're looking for your forever scissor is really, how does it feel in your hand? Now, this could be a little harder to deal with during the pandemic at the moment, but if it's not feeling good in your hand, then you're not going to want to use it. Always go for a tool that you're the most comfortable with and that you want to use. And those two things together, I generally recommend for most people to look for a scissor in between the 8 and the 10 range. Now, unless you're a dressmaker professionally, a tailor professionally, it's like having a chef's knife where if you have the 12-inch, you're going to be able to do absolutely everything that you want to do with the 12-inch. The 10 is generally what I personally prefer to use in my day-to-day, but I will also reach for an 8-inch. So any skill level, I think, can use any size of scissor.
And how about carbon versus stainless steel?
That's a really good question. So I think I'll start with the stainless steel. So I have a pair of our Prism stainless steel here, and it's about the same size roughly to the 9-inch Midnight or the 9-inch traditional, which doesn't have the black coating, but it's essentially the same scissor. So a stainless steel scissor, for us anyway, it's going to be a little bit heavier than your carbon steel. It's a harder metal to work with, generally. It's a little bit more brittle, meaning it could chip if you're using it on something that's a little bit too heavy. So what I actually recommend the stainless steel for more than the carbon steel would be working with lighter fabrics, something silkier, something that slips, because it just so happens that our stainless steel are also sharpened at an angle where they pull in slippery fabrics, so they're not going to slide around as much. This one in particular, and this is the same for our 8 and our 9-inch stainless steel scissors, they have a different handle shape. I'm just going to move a little bit than the carbon steel. So I generally refer to this style of handle as more of a European style handle. It's more popular with European producers. And if I hold it this way, you can actually see that it's more straight. It's a little bit more flat. So when it's in your hand, in particular, right up against your thumb here, it's going to feel different than this handle, which is actually a little bit more curved this way. So that rests on your thumb here differently. So that's, in terms of comfort, it's incredibly personal. If someone grew up preferring this style of handle, they might not find this handle as comfortable. So I like to refer to this handle as sort of an East Asian style handle. You find this handle shape more predominantly in China, Korea, Taiwan, Japan, versus the European style handle.
Is there an American style handle?
I think it's probably more similar to the European one, the same traditions coming together. So I mentioned the angle at which they're sharpened. These two scissors are sharpened at different angles, which is why I sometimes recommend them for different things. Though it is sometimes difficult to resist the allure of what these look like. And they'll cut through anything, just like the Midnight will cut through anything. So sometimes it does come down to just an aesthetic and what you prefer. And I don't think you can really go wrong.
Do you have to care for the stainless steel differently than you care for the carbon steel?
You do. So the stainless steel, of course, they're known for being rust resistant. I wouldn't go as far as saying rust proof. So in terms of rust, oiling, things like that, if you are putting aside your scissors for a little while, maybe you are a little burnt out, not inspired, and you just need a break, you don't have to coat these in oil to protect from humidity. You can just put them in the box, put them up, and they're generally going to be completely fine. For something like the Midnight or even the traditional, the Midnight do have an anti-rust coating on them, and that's what the black coating is for, other than looking very cool. But we always recommend that the exposed metal all the way up, the button on both sides, and then if you open them up as well, you can get some oil right into here on both sides. Just make sure you're covering them in oil, putting them back into the box, and that's going to make sure that they are protected from any moisture in the air, any humidity, anything like that. Because carbon steel is not rust proof and it is a bit of a softer metal. So it's best to keep them in their box, I would say.
They're a softer metal, but you can get a sharper point on them, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You can sharpen them sharper because they're so soft.
And when we're talking oil, we're just talking like vegetable oil.
Exactly. I've even used coconut oil. I've used olive oil, any oil pretty much. You're good to go. But there could be some fragrance if you're using something that's a little bit smellier. But if you don't mind coconut oil smell, then I mean, that's perfect.
And how often do we need to sharpen our scissors?
It's going to depend person to person. If you use them more frequently, you're going to have to sharpen them more frequently. For the stainless steel, they actually hold their edge better than the carbon steel. So they hold it a little bit longer. So you're less likely to sharpen them more. And really what you're cutting as well is going to affect the sharpness. So natural fibers are going to dull your blade less than synthetic fibers, and even paper as well, because of the synthetic components in those fibers. So if you're looking for something that maybe you don't want to, if you don't want to take care of it that much, if you want something to last sharpness wise a little bit longer, I would recommend the stainless steel. But if you need to do a lot of cutting through thick materials, if you do macrame, anything like that, I'd recommend a carbon steel scissor.
Where do we go to get them sharpened?
We offer sharpening for our scissors, but not other brands, unfortunately, because each scissor manufacturer makes them a different way and they sharpen them at different angles. We have recommended before, actually, you can, if it's available to you, you can go to a skate sharpener, like an ice skate sharpener, because it's almost the same thing where you have to sharpen on a very specific angle. You can take it to a knife sharpener, but do ask them if they've ever done scissors before. And if they haven't, if you have a pair that you don't maybe care as much for, take that to them first and you can see how that goes for you.
We talked about it just briefly. How do we care for them? Just rubbing it on with a piece of cotton batting, or do we dip them in the oil?
So, and even beyond resting, oiling is really good for keeping them smooth. And especially in the button, that's going to be very important. What I'll generally do is I'll just take a small bowl I'll have whatever oil is in there. Even just a tablespoon is fine. It doesn't have to be excessive. And take whichever scrap piece of cloth you're using, put it right into the bowl and saturate it. And you take the cloth, maybe do this in your kitchen so you don't get oil everywhere. And you open your scissor up and you just put that oil everywhere. You use that cloth and you don't have to rub it in. You can kind of just get a nice coating on there. And to get it to the button, what I like to do is really focus on these areas.
Right.
Catch the light there, right into there. And once it's in there, you can sort of open and close your scissors a couple times. And that's really going to help the oil travel to that button. And you can rub the cloth onto the button, make sure everything is nice and coated. You can take it off right away if you need to and you want to use your scissors immediately, or you can just let it sit. It's not going to hurt to let the oil sit and wipe it off. And I promise you it's going to feel so much better. If you are using your scissors a lot and you're finding that they're feeling, for lack of a better word, almost crunchy, if that makes sense, it's not smooth, it feels like there might be some burrs on your blade, just check to see how clean your blade is. Even just giving them a wipe with a clean cloth is going to make them feel a lot better.
Well, I watched your video on Instagram on cleaning, and I did that the next day. I can remember feeling, oh, it feels a little rough in this section, and could not believe the difference oiling those blades and just cleaning them with oil made it suddenly, they were just really nice and smooth all over again.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
I have an old pair of pinking shears. I swear they're probably just as old as I am, but they've only been used maybe a half dozen times because they're so hard to open and shut. Is there a way of making them easier to open and shut, or is that button tight and never coming loose?
Well, you could certainly try to get some oil into that button. Each manufacturer, again, they have a different mechanism. I forgot to bring up a pair of pinking shears, but on ours, there's a ball bearing. I can try and explain it here. When you open our pinking shears, there's a little ball bearing piece that's right here, and that's what regulates sort of the smoothness. If yours has that, I would try putting some oil into there and really just trying to rub it around. If it doesn't, you can even try and take some WD-40 and just kind of like spray it into the button. We've certainly tried that on older pinking shears that we've sort of inherited from Roy's mom, and it's been okay. You might have to let it sit a little bit or do it a couple times, but that might be your best bet.
So how many different types of scissors do you have? You just showed us were they called applique scissors? What were they called?
These are called our imperial scissors, and they're just really, really nice small gold scissors. They have a straight edge.
They look kind of like bonsai scissors.
Oh, a little bit. Yeah. It's the same sort of style with the curved handles. So these are 3.5 inches. They're the smallest ones that we have, but we carry them up to 6 inches. So these have been really, really popular when we were doing shows in 2019 with quilters for applique. But we did get some requests about wool applique scissors because we learned at that time that a serrated blade would be better for that. So we have these really fun squishy handle scissors that are serrated, and for wool applique or anything small that is slippery, a serrated edge is really going to be best. Though you can't sharpen the serrated edge, you can only sharpen the straight edge. We also have our really classic snips, which are more popular with fiber artists and sewers, but some quilters also really love to use these for applique or very small cuts. You can just put it right on, hangs on your hand. If you have something very, very small, you can just sort of get right in there.
My snips are more valuable than my most expensive pair of scissors because I use them so often. I mean, I have one on my ironing board. I have one beside my sewing table. I have one in every kit.
They're such a good little handy tool. Like, it's hard to underestimate how good of a scissor that they are.
So what's the difference between an applique scissor and an embroidery scissor?
I wouldn't say there's actually that much of a difference. You can use any scissor almost for any application. For the applique, I will go back to speaking to the serrated edge, which generally will be a little bit easier to use because you're going to be able to grip that fabric for the smaller pieces. For embroidery, anything that you like to handle would be a good one for embroidery, I would say.
How small do your blades go down? So you've got the 8-inch. What's the next step down from that?
For proper shears, the 8 inches are smallest. And then the next one, we have a multi-purpose that's probably about yay big. But in terms of a proper scissor, the 8" is the smallest. But we do have craft scissors that are also around the 8" size, though we are thinking about a smaller scissor around a 7" specifically for paper patterns.
So paper, why does paper dull scissors?
So I've gotten a couple emails about this, not surprising at all. The main thing about paper to keep in mind is that it's not just fiber, it's not just wood fiber that goes into paper. Generally, if it's commercial paper, it's paper that's been treated and then potentially also filled with other materials, other synthetic materials. So you could technically, if you wanted to mix your materials with your scissors, and that goes for using your natural fiber scissors on your synthetic fiber scissors. You could do that, though it is going to dull your blade a lot quicker than if you're using 1-for-1. But it's mostly just because they're not straight wood fiber. So you can. Do I recommend it? No, not really.
I'm very good at, I have a pair of paper scissors as close as my good scissors, but I'm always worried when I'm mixing them,
Mhm.
like I'm cutting through like steam seam with
Mhm.
with fabric. What do I use then?
You use what you have. Honestly, if you have one tool, use it. You know, whatever you're most comfortable with. We're all about making sure everything is accessible. So if you can afford only one scissor, then use that for everything that you have to use it for. Absolutely.
Been in the rotary cutter business for a while, but you now have a new one. How is the blade different on a rotary blade than it is on a scissor?
Mostly comes down to the material that's being used. On our rotary blades, we use carbon steel, which is the same material we use for the midnight shears and the traditional shears. And they're going to last, according to our testing, which we did at a couple of fabric stores in Toronto over the course of a couple months. They've lasted between 4 to 5 months on one blade. And that's because the carbon steel versus maybe a tungsten or a titanium steel blade is just going to last so much longer because of the quality of the metal and just the way that it's sharpened.
I can't tell you how many times I've been upset that I've changed my blade and then I mistakenly hit something and I go, it was brand
Oh
new.
my gosh.
So you got a new one coming out. What's different about yours?
I have it right here. So it's obviously not the first straight handle, but what we really have loved with ours is this guard that's on our new cutter. So with this guard, you can only touch the blade when it's been pushed down. So for us, that was really, really important because we want to make sure that if you have little ones around or anyone that you don't want to be able to access the blade, that they might not be able to if it's just sitting around. And one thing that we also wanted to keep in mind was when we were going from the curved handle design that we used to have to a straight handle design, that we could accommodate some of the benefits of the curved handle. So the way that we do that is by being able to push the guard. Be so careful when you don't do this the way I'm doing this right now. From side to side. And what that gives you is a new part of the blade to be able to cut with. So not only can you cut this way, but with the guard, you can now cut a little bit lower, like on a curved handle rotary cutter. So you get the benefit of both a straight handle cutter and a curved cutter with more access to the blade. So we're really, really happy with that and how it's turned out.
And you can be left-handed or right-handed.
Exactly. I'm right-handed. My husband's left-handed. So we can both use it and it's no problem. You don't have to change the blade or anything like that. Just hand to hand and you're good to go.
So if a person doesn't have access to a sharpener, is there a way that you might recommend sharpening at home?
Not at the moment, unfortunately. It's so hard because like I keep saying, each manufacturer is so different. And what's so important about sharpening a scissor is that the angle at which you are sharpening that blade has to be perfect. Not only that, but the sign of a good scissor really is that these blades are actually concave like this So the only time they're touching is when the edge is cutting through something. And if by accident you trim a little bit into that curve, it's not going to function as a scissor anymore. I know that there are some machines that you can get for home just online that are, you just put the scissor in and you pull it out. But if it's not designed for that specific angle of scissor, it might work 1 or 2 times, but in the long run, you're going to be hurting that blade, unfortunately.
Does cutting through aluminum foil keep your scissors sharper?
Will it keep them sharper? I mean, maybe like 1 time, but at the end of the day, what you're doing is you are cutting through metal and you are really harming your scissor blade long term, because that's a very hard material to be cutting through, even if it's a very thin piece of aluminum foil. So it's something else that I don't recommend. I've said maybe like in a pinch, if you were really, really in a pinch, maybe do it 1 time. But it's unfortunate that no, there's nothing I would recommend right now on the market.
Why does it give it a temporary sharpness, but not a long-term sharpness?
I believe it's just getting one part of the edge of that blade. It's not really getting the full part of that blade, if that makes sense. So it'd be like sharpening a knife with one of those knife sharpeners that's like a long stick. You just do 1 pass 1 time. It's probably gonna sharpen it a little bit, but unless you're really doing it professionally, you're not gonna see the results.
Okay, so the most important thing when you're sharpening then is the angle, and that's set by the manufacturer.
Yeah, exactly.
If somebody is left-handed, what do they need?
The typical left-handed scissors that you're gonna find is essentially a right-handed scissor with a left-handed handle. So the blades are still oriented for a right-handed user. It's just that now you can put it in your left hand and maybe it feels a little more comfortable. And a true left-handed pair of scissors is where both have been switched. So if you look at a pair of scissors and you're right-handed, what I'm looking at right now is my hand is in line with the blade that is most prominent on the top. And that's what I'm looking at when I go to cut. Now it's obviously the complete opposite for a left-handed user. So everything has to be switched. Otherwise you're looking the opposite way to what you're cutting, and it's just so uncomfortable. So look for something that has been completely switched. And I've also known a lot of left-handed users, because of the issue that you're saying, they've been trained their whole life to cut right-handed, is that there can be a bit of a relearning period of how to use a scissor, because sometimes it just doesn't make sense because you've never been able to do it the right way.
Well, I was with a person who was left-handed, and she had bought these scissors, and she was with the manufacturer a year later saying, I could never use them. I couldn't do them. And we spent probably 30 minutes there, and I was doing it too, just relaxing your body and just lightly doing it. Like, I guess left-handed people are used to clenching and everything just to get some kind of leverage, where she had to just kind of breathe and let it out. I couldn't believe how hard it was. And I had a whole new respect for that. They definitely have been challenged all their life in a right-handed world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a completely unfair thing that left-handed people have had to go through. And another reason that that could be happening to them is they've been trained to angle their hand to look at what they're cutting. And that's why they're not able to cut through something, is because they have to be able to cut straight and not like this.
Right.
So another thing to keep in mind, but it is unfortunate.
So do you have a left-handed scissor? I would think so, with your husband being left-handed.
Yes, we have 2. We have one proper shear in 10 inches. It's our Midnight Edition true left-handed midnight shears. And we just released our left-handed craft scissor. So it's 8 inches. It's super lightweight. You can use it on fabric, for paper crafts, for whatever you have to do. And we have that in silver coating as well as in the midnight coating.
Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate all these facts. If people want to get a hold of you or watch any of your videos and your tutorials, where do they go?
You can check out our Instagram, LDH_scissors. You can go to our website. We like to think we're really easy to get in contact with. You can DM us. You can send us an email to our info@ldhscissors.com or Ursula@ldhscissors.com. Ursula is spelled the same way as the sea witch from The Little Mermaid. So I do most of the social media. Roy sees it too. So we're both pretty on top of it. And if you don't hear back from us within 48 hours, if you use the contact form on our website, you can just send us an email or a DM.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen.
Ursula has done some excellent tutorials on how to care for your scissors, and I will leave a link in the notes below to her Instagram feed, her YouTube channel, and her website. There are also a couple of videos there from other artisans who use their scissors, and they're extremely well done. I especially like the one from the Hollywood shoemaker, so check them out. Next up on Karen's Quilt Circle is Laura Horton of the Red River First Nations, and we are talking about quilting in the North. And check out some of my other interviews on Karen's Quilt Circle. There are some amazing people in the quilting world with lots to share, and I'll leave a link in the notes below. Last week I uploaded Revisiting an Old UFO, how to get that project out of the closet and off the to-do list. And I'll leave a link in the notes to that as well. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell beside the subscribe button so that YouTube will notify you when I make new videos. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest at Just Get It Done Quilts, and of course my website where you can sign up for my newsletter at justgetitdonequilts.com. So take care, and I'll see you next time.